Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we descend into the forgotten corners of Canada. Places where the cold doesn't just bite your skin, it settles into your bones and whispers things you were never meant to hear. These are the back roads that don't appear on newer maps. The logging camps where men stopped showing up for work and no one asked why. The small towns that exist in the space between what we call civilization and what we've always feared lives just beyond it. These stories come from people who were there. People who saw things that made them question whether the world operates the way we've been told. Some of these accounts were shared in truck stop diners at 3 a.m, voices low, eyes watching the door. Others were found in incident reports that were quietly filed away, marked inconclusive, never mentioned again. A few were told to us directly, by people who needed someone, anyone, to believe them. The accounts you're about to hear span the dense forests of British Columbia, the wind-scraped plains of Alberta, the isolated mining territories of the Northwest, and the fog-choked shores of the Maritimes. What they share is this: they all happened in places where help is far away, where night lasts longer than it should, and where the line between the living and whatever else is out there becomes dangerously thin. If you're drawn to the kind of truth that lingers in the dark, make sure to subscribe and stay with us tonight. The sound started 3 hours before dawn, and it came from a place where no one should have been. It was rhythmic, deliberate, a low, hollow thudding that carried through the trees with a clarity that made no sense given the distance. I was alone in the survey tent, logging data from the previous day's soil samples, when I first heard it. At first, I thought it was machinery, maybe one of the drilling crews working overnight. But the pattern was wrong. Too slow, too organic. It sounded like someone beating on wood with their palms, over and over in groups of 4. Thud, 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 pause, thud, 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 thud. I stepped outside into air so cold it burned my lungs. The stars were sharp and infinite above the tree line. Nothing moved. The drumming continued. Coming from the clearing we'd surveyed 2 days earlier, the one the local Dainzar elder had quietly asked us not to disturb. My name is Marcus Ibarra. I'm 31, and at the time of this, I was working as a geological surveyor for a mining exploration company operating in northeastern British Columbia, just south of the Yukon border. We were scouting for mineral deposits in an area that hadn't seen industrial activity in over 40 years. I've always been the kind of person who trusts measurements, data, things you can put on a spreadsheet. I didn't believe in curses or sacred ground or any of that. I thought respect for Indigenous warnings was about politeness and legal liability, not actual danger. I was wrong. The project had been running for 11 days. Our crew consisted of 8 people, 4 surveyors, 2 geologists, a camp coordinator, and a security officer named Brendan Cuthbert, a former RCMP officer who mostly sat in his truck and drank coffee. The site was accessible only by a logging road that hadn't been maintained in years. The nearest town, if you could call it that, was over 90 kilometers away. We had satellite phones, a diesel generator, and enough supplies for 3 weeks. The night the drumming started, everyone else was asleep. Brendan was supposed to be on watch, but I hadn't seen him in over an hour. I grabbed a flashlight and started walking toward the clearing. I don't know why. Curiosity, maybe. Or that stupid human instinct to investigate the thing that's clearly wrong. The drumming got louder as I approached. It wasn't coming from the center of the clearing. It was coming from just inside the tree line on the far side. I swept my flashlight across the area. Nothing. Just snow and the dark columns of spruce trees pressed together like prison bars. Then the drumming stopped. The silence that followed was worse. It had weight. I stood there, breath fogging in front of my face, waiting for something to move. When nothing did, I called out, "Hello? Someone out here?" My voice sounded small and stupid. No response. I took a step forward, then another. My flashlight beam caught something near the base of a tree, a shape low to the ground. I moved closer. It was a drum. Not a modern drum. This was old. The frame was wood, bent into a wide circle and lashed together with sinew or leather cord. The drumhead was hide, stretched tight and painted with faded red symbols I didn't recognize. It was sitting upright against the tree trunk, perfectly positioned, as if someone had just set it down, but there were no footprints in the snow around it. Not one. I crouched down and reached out to touch it. The hide was ice cold. The moment my fingers made contact, I heard something behind me. A low, guttural sound, like a breath being forced out of a chest too small to hold it. I spun around, flashlight cutting through the dark. Nothing. I grabbed the drum and started back toward camp. I don't know why I took it. Maybe I thought it was evidence of something. Maybe I just didn't want to leave it out there. The whole way back, I felt like something was walking parallel to me, just outside the beam of my flashlight. I never saw it, but I felt it watching. When I got back to the tent, Brendan was standing outside, smoking a cigarette. He looked at the drum in my hands and his face went pale. "Where the hell did you get that?" "The clearing. It was just sitting there." "You brought it back?" Before I could answer, the drumming started again. But this time, it wasn't coming from the clearing. It was coming from inside the camp, from one of the sleeping tents. Brendan dropped his cigarette and pulled a flashlight from his belt. We moved toward the sound. It was coming from the tent where our two geologists were sleeping, a man named Darren McKay and a woman named Simone Pelletier. Brendan unzipped the tent flap and shone his light inside. They were both sitting upright in their sleeping bags, eyes open, staring straight ahead. Their hands were moving in unison, palms slapping against their thighs in the same rhythm I'd heard in the clearing. Thud, 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 thud. "Darren!" Brendan shouted. "Simone!" They didn't respond. Their eyes didn't blink. They just kept drumming, their faces completely blank, like they were somewhere else entirely. I reached out and grabbed Darren by the shoulder, shaking him hard. His skin was freezing. The moment I touched him, he stopped. His head turned slowly toward me, and when he spoke, his voice was flat and toneless. "It wants it back." Then he collapsed. Simone stopped a second later, gasping like she'd just surfaced from deep water. She looked around, confused and terrified, with no memory of what had just happened. Darren was unconscious, but breathing. We got him into the med tent, wrapped him in blankets, tried to get his core temperature up. By the time the sun rose, he was awake, but refused to speak. He just stared at the tent wall, shaking. That morning, I told our camp coordinator, a woman named Ainsley Trudeau, what had happened. She didn't believe me. Not until she saw the drum. She wanted to call the project off immediately, but our site manager, a man named Victor Horn, refused. He said we were 2 days away from completing the survey and that we weren't going to lose the contract because people got spooked. That night, I took the drum back to the clearing. I didn't tell anyone. I just walked out there alone, placed it exactly where I'd found it, and walked away. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The drumming started again the next night, but this time it was louder, closer, and it didn't stop at dawn. On the third night, Brendan disappeared. We found his truck still running, door open, flashlight on the ground. His footprints led into the forest and stopped abruptly in the middle of a snowfield. Just ended, like he'd been lifted into the air. Search and rescue came in 2 days later. They found nothing. No body, no tracks beyond that point. No explanation. The RCMP wrote it up as a voluntary disappearance, though they couldn't explain the footprints. The project was shut down. The company paid out settlements to the families and buried the incident under a pile of legal paperwork. I quit 3 weeks later. I haven't been back to that part of the province. I sold my field gear, moved to Vancouver, and now I work in an office where the strangest thing that happens is someone microwaving fish in the break room. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear it. That slow, methodical drumming. I'll be lying in bed, half asleep, and it'll start. Quiet at first, then louder until I'm sitting upright, heart pounding, knowing full well that there's nothing there. The official story is that Brendan Cuthbert walked away from the site during a mental health episode and succumbed to exposure somewhere in the wilderness. That's what the reports say. That's what his family was told, but I was there. I saw his footprints end in the middle of nowhere. I heard what was in those woods. And I know what happened to him. If you've ever been somewhere you weren't supposed to be, if you've ever taken something that wasn't yours to take, I need you to understand something. Some places have rules older than any law we've written. And when you break them, you don't get a warning. You don't get a second chance. You just disappear. The police report said she'd been living down there for 6 weeks. The family who found her, or what they thought was her, had just moved into the house 3 days earlier. It was their 7-year-old daughter who heard the scratching first. She told her parents there was someone under her bedroom floor trying to get out. They thought it was pipes or maybe an animal that had gotten into the crawl space. It wasn't until they opened the basement door and smelled the air down there that they realized something was very, very wrong. When the RCMP arrived, they found a woman standing in the corner of the unfinished basement, facing the wall, completely still. She was filthy. Her hair was matted. Her clothes were torn. She didn't respond to commands, didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge their presence in any way. One of the officers approached her slowly, calling out, asking if she needed help. When he touched her shoulder, she collapsed. Not like a person fainting, like a puppet with its strings cut. She hit the concrete floor and didn't move. The officer checked for a pulse. There wasn't one. She'd been dead for at least 3 days. My name is Claire Devereaux, and I'm a forensic investigator with the RCMP in southern Alberta. I'm 43 years old. I've been doing this job for 19 years, and I've seen just about every kind of death you can imagine. Accidents, suicides, murders, overdoses, exposure. I've worked cases that were brutal and cases that were just sad. But I've never worked one that made me feel like the world I thought I understood had rules I didn't know about. This case started in the town of Redstone, a small community about 70 kilometers northwest of Lethbridge. Population just under 2,000. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and the biggest crime in a given month is usually someone stealing copper wire from a construction site. The house where the woman was found had been empty for almost a year. It was a 2-story build from the early 1980s, nothing special. Vinyl siding, small yard, single-car garage. The previous owner, a man named Gordon Leach, had died of a heart attack the previous autumn. His estate had finally sold the property in early March to a couple from Calgary, Trevor and Monica Ashford, and their 2 children. The Ashfords moved in on a Saturday. By Monday night, they were staying in a motel and refusing to go back. I arrived Tuesday morning with a team that included a forensic pathologist, Dr. Yusuf Rahman, and 2 crime scene techs. We met with the responding officers first. One of them, Constable Andrea Pelke, had been first on scene. She was young, maybe 26, and she looked like she hadn't slept since it happened. "I've been doing this 4 years," she said. "I've never seen anything like that." She was just standing there, staring at the wall. When I touched her, she just fell. "Did she say anything?" I asked. "No, nothing. She didn't even seem to know we were there." "And you're certain she was dead when she hit the floor?" Dr. Rahman examined her on site. No pulse, no breathing, no response. Body temp suggested she'd been dead for at least 72 hours, but she was standing. I looked at Yusuf. He nodded. "Rigor mortis was already dissipating," he said. "Lividity was fixed. She should have been stiff and cold, but when the officer touched her, she moved. Not like a reflex, like she'd been holding herself up and then just let go. The house was sealed as a potential crime scene. We started in the basement. The smell was still there. Not decomposition exactly, but something sour and organic, like wet soil and old meat. The floor was bare concrete, the walls unfinished, insulation showing between the studs. There was a furnace in one corner and a water heater in another. No furniture and no belongings. Just a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. The woman had been standing in the corner farthest from the stairs. We found scuff marks on the floor where her feet had been. On the wall in front of her, scratched into the drywall with something sharp, maybe a nail or a piece of metal, were words. "I can't leave, I can't leave, I can't leave," over and over, layered on top of each other dozens of times until the plaster was gouged away in places. We identified her 2 days later through dental records. Her name was Pauline Geoffrion. She was 56 years old. She'd been reported missing 7 weeks earlier by her sister, who lived in Medicine Hat. Pauline had been staying with her after a difficult divorce. One morning in late January, she'd left the house to go for a walk and never came back. Her car was found 3 days later in the parking lot of a grocery store in Redstone, 25 kilometers from where she'd been staying. No signs of struggle, no leads. And now here she was, dead in the basement of a house she had no connection to, standing upright days after she'd died. We interviewed everyone who'd known her. Her sister, Rebecca Geoffrion, said Pauline had been depressed but not suicidal. She'd been talking about starting over, maybe moving to British Columbia, getting a job in hospitality. She liked to walk, she liked to be alone, but she wasn't unstable. She was getting better, Rebecca said. She was finally getting better. We pulled the history on the house. Gordon Leach, the previous owner, had lived there alone for 30 years. No criminal record, no complaints from neighbors. He'd worked as a maintenance supervisor for the town's public works department. Quiet guy, kept to himself, died in his sleep. No signs of foul play. But when we dug deeper, we found something. In 1994, a woman named Colleen Birch had gone missing in Redstone. She was 41 at the time, a school teacher, divorced, lived alone. She'd been last seen leaving a community center after a town hall meeting. Her car was found 2 days later in the parking lot of a grocery store. The same grocery store where Pauline Geoffrion's car had been found. No signs of struggle, no leads. The case went cold. Her body was never found. Gordon Leach had been questioned during the investigation. He'd been at the town hall meeting that night. He'd spoken to Colleen briefly, but there was no evidence linking him to her disappearance, and he was never charged. We got a warrant to excavate the basement. We pulled up the concrete, dug down through 2 feet of soil, and found her. Colleen Birch. Skeletal remains, partially mummified. Wrapped in plastic sheeting and buried directly beneath where Pauline Geoffrion had been standing. The autopsy determined she'd been strangled. Forensic analysis suggested she'd been killed shortly after she went missing and buried in the basement while the concrete was being poured during a renovation project Gordon had done in 1995. We don't know how Pauline ended up in that house. We don't know how she got into the basement or why she stayed there. The door wasn't locked. There were no restraints, no signs of physical trauma beyond malnutrition and dehydration. Toxicology came back clean. According to the pathologist, she died of cardiac arrest brought on by severe physical stress. But that didn't explain how she'd been standing for days after her heart stopped. The Ashfords never moved back into the house. They broke their mortgage and left town. The property was eventually sold again, demolished, and turned into a community garden. The official explanation, the one that went into the final report, is that Pauline Geoffrion, suffering from a dissociative episode, wandered into the house through an unlocked basement window and became trapped due to confusion and delirium. She died alone, and her body was found shortly thereafter in a state of advanced rigor that gave the appearance of her standing upright. That's what we wrote. But I was there. I saw the scratches on the wall. I saw where she'd been standing, directly above the body of another woman who'd been murdered 30 years earlier. And I read the interviews with the Ashfords' daughter, who said she'd heard two voices in the basement, one crying and one whispering, "Help me. Please, I can't leave." I don't work homicide anymore. I transferred to cybercrime last year. I told my supervisor it was for career development. That wasn't the reason. The reason is that I don't trust what I see anymore. I don't trust that the dead stay dead or that places are ever really empty. I don't trust that we're alone when we think we are. If you've ever felt like someone was in your house when you knew no one was there, if you've ever heard something you couldn't explain and tried to convince yourself it was nothing, I need you to listen to me. Don't ignore it. Don't tell yourself it's just the wind or the pipes or your imagination, because sometimes it's not. The school bus never made it to the next stop. At 7:47 a.m. on a Thursday morning in October, a bus carrying 23 elementary school children passed through the intersection of Highway 16 and Township Road 392, just outside the town of Valemount, British Columbia. The crossing guard on duty that morning, a man named Ernest Paquet, waved them through. The driver, a woman named Denise Kowalski, waved back. 15 seconds later, the bus was gone. Not crashed, not off the road, just gone. The next scheduled stop was less than 2 kilometers away. When the bus didn't arrive after 10 minutes, parents started calling the school. The school called the RCMP. Officers were dispatched to the route. They found nothing. No bus, no skid marks, no debris, no signs of an accident. The road was empty. They went back to the intersection and spoke to Ernest Paquet. He was still standing at his post, holding his stop sign, staring down the highway with a strange, distant look on his face. "Where did the bus go?" the officer asked him. Ernest didn't answer. He just kept staring. "My name is Owen Gallagher. I'm 58 years old, and at the time this happened, I was a staff sergeant with the RCMP detachment in Valemount. I'd been with the force for 31 years. I'd worked traffic accidents, domestic disturbances, thefts, assaults, even a couple of homicides. I thought I'd seen everything. I was wrong. Valemount is a small town nestled in the Rocky Mountains, population around 1,200. It's a logging and tourism community. Quiet, safe, the kind of place where people don't lock their doors. Highway 16 runs right through it, connecting Prince George to the west with Jasper to the east. It's a busy road, especially in the mornings. Ernest Paquet had been the crossing guard at that intersection for 19 years. He was 71, a retired mill worker, friendly, reliable, loved by the kids. Every school morning, he'd be out there at 7:30 sharp, rain or shine, making sure the buses and students got across safely. Everyone knew him. When we arrived at the intersection that morning, Ernest was still there. He hadn't moved. One of my officers, Constable Fiona Devereux, approached him gently. "Ernest, are you all right?" He turned to look at her, but his eyes didn't focus. He looked through her like she wasn't there. "They went into the fold," he said. "What fold?" "Ernest, where did the bus go?" "Into the fold, where the road bends, where the light doesn't go." We got him into a cruiser and called for an ambulance. He wasn't making sense. His vitals were stable, but he seemed confused, disoriented, possibly having a stroke. The paramedics took him to the hospital in Prince George. Meanwhile, we expanded the search. We had helicopters in the air within 2 hours. Search and rescue teams combing the highways and back roads. dogs, drones. We checked every logging road, every turnoff, every possible route the bus could have taken. We contacted every town and checkpoint within a 100-kilometer radius. We issued an Amber Alert. We had officers going door to door, checking properties, asking if anyone had seen anything. Nothing. 23 children and 1 driver vanished without a trace. The families were devastated. Parents were screaming, crying, demanding answers we didn't have. The media descended on Valemount like locusts. The town became a circus of reporters, satellite trucks, investigators, and volunteers. The pressure was crushing. On the second day, we brought in a forensic team to examine the intersection. They found something strange. On the pavement, right in the center of the southbound lane, there was a patch of asphalt that looked wrong. The texture was different, smoother, almost glassy. When they tested it, the molecular structure didn't match the rest of the road. It was as if the asphalt in that specific spot had been heated to an extreme temperature and then rapidly cooled. But there was no burn pattern, no scorch marks, no explanation for what could have caused it. We reviewed traffic camera footage from a gas station half a kilometer down the road. The footage showed the bus passing through the intersection at exactly 7:47 a.m. Ernest Paquet was visible in the frame, waving his stop sign. The bus entered the frame from the north, crossed the intersection, and continued south. And then, between one frame and the next, a gap of less than 2 seconds, the bus was gone. It didn't drive out of frame. It didn't crash. It simply ceased to exist between 2 frames of video. The technicians checked the footage for corruption, glitches, tampering. There was none. The timestamp was continuous. The footage was clean. The bus was there, and then it wasn't. On the third day, we went back to the hospital to interview Ernest. He'd been sedated, but the doctors said he was stable enough to talk. I sat down next to his bed and asked him to tell me exactly what he saw that morning. He stared at the ceiling for a long time before he spoke. "I've been standing at that crossing for 19 years, he said. "Every morning, same time, same place. And every morning I see the same thing. The road, the trees, the mountains. But that morning something was different. Different how? The light was wrong. The sun was coming up like it always does, but the light, it wasn't hitting the road the way it should. There was a shadow, a big one, stretched across the intersection, but there was nothing casting it. A shadow from what? I don't know. It was just there, and when the bus drove into it, it didn't come out the other side. He looked at me then, and his eyes were wet. I watched it disappear, he said. I watched it go into the shadow, and it didn't come out, and I just stood there, because I didn't know what else to do." Ernest Paquet died 4 days later. Heart attack. The doctors said it was unrelated to the incident, just bad luck and old age. I'm not so sure. The search continued for 3 weeks. We found nothing. No bodies, no wreckage, no evidence of where the bus or its passengers had gone. The case was eventually classified as an unexplained mass disappearance. Theories ranged from abduction to mechanical failure to some kind of environmental anomaly. None of them fit the evidence. The intersection was closed for 2 months while engineers examined the road. They tore up the entire section of highway, dug down 6 feet, and found nothing unusual. When they repaved it, they used a completely different routing. The old crossing doesn't exist anymore. They moved the road 30 meters to the west. I retired 6 months after it happened. I couldn't do the job anymore. Every time I got a call, every time I saw a school bus, I'd think about those kids. About Denise Kowalski, who had 2 children of her own. About the parents who still don't know what happened. About Ernest, standing at that intersection, watching something he couldn't explain. The official explanation is that there is no explanation. The case remains open, but no active investigation is ongoing. The families hold memorials every year. Some of them still think their children are out there somewhere. Others have accepted that they're gone. I don't know what I believe anymore. But I do know this. There are places in this world where the rules break down. Places where the things we take for granted, like roads going where they're supposed to, or objects staying where they are, don't apply. And sometimes, people end up in those places, and they don't come back. If you've ever driven down a road and felt like something was watching you, if you've ever seen a shadow that didn't belong to anything, trust that feeling. Turn around. Take a different route, because some crossings don't take you where you think they're going. The realtor said it was a steal. 3-bedroom bungalow built in 1967, located on a quiet street in Red Deer, Alberta. Original hardwood floors, updated kitchen, finished basement, large backyard. It had been on the market for 8 months and had dropped in price twice. When I asked why, the realtor, a cheerful woman named Gwen Sinclair, said the previous owners had relocated for work and were motivated to sell. She said it with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I should have asked more questions. My name is Jordan Holloway. I'm 34 years old. I work as a logistics coordinator for an oil and gas company, and in the summer of 2019, I bought my first house. I was single, had saved up a decent down payment, and wanted to stop throwing money away on rent. The bungalow in Red Deer seemed perfect. Affordable. Move-in ready. Good neighborhood. I put in an offer, and it was accepted within 24 hours. I moved in on a Saturday in late June. The first week was normal. I unpacked, arranged furniture, got to know the neighbors. The couple next door, Harold and Rita Pembroke, were in their 70s and had lived on the street for 40 years. They were polite but distant. When I mentioned I'd bought the house, Harold gave me a long look and said, "Well, good luck with it." Then he went back inside. I didn't think much of it at the time. The first strange thing happened 9 days after I moved in. I was lying in bed, almost asleep, when I heard it. A low, rhythmic sound, like someone breathing. Slow and deep. In, out, in, out. It was coming from somewhere inside the house. I got up and checked every room. Nothing. The sound stopped as soon as I started moving. I told myself it was the furnace, or maybe the air conditioner cycling on. Old house, old systems. It made sense. The second time I was in the kitchen making coffee. It was early morning, maybe 6:30, and the house was quiet. Then I heard it again. That slow, deliberate breathing, like someone standing right behind me. I spun around. No one there. The sound continued for another 10 seconds, then stopped. I called an HVAC technician. He came out the next day, checked the furnace, the ducts, the vents. Everything was fine. He said old houses make noise, especially when the temperature changes. Expanding metal. Settling foundations. Nothing to worry about. But it kept happening. Every few days I'd hear it. Sometimes in the basement, sometimes in the hallway. Once, I heard it coming from inside the bedroom closet. I opened the door and the sound stopped immediately. I started keeping a log. Time of day, duration, location. I thought maybe I could find a pattern, figure out what was causing it. I couldn't. The breathing was random. It didn't correlate with temperature, time of day, or anything else I could measure, and it was always the same. Slow, steady, human. 3 weeks after I moved in, I was vacuuming the living room when I noticed something odd. There was a section of the hardwood floor near the corner by the window that felt different underfoot. Softer, almost spongy. I crouched down and pressed on it with my hand. The wood flexed slightly, like there was a gap underneath. I pulled back the area rug and examined the floor. One of the boards was loose. I pried it up with a flathead screwdriver, expecting to find rot or water damage. Instead, I found a journal. It was small, bound in brown leather, the pages yellowed and brittle. The handwriting inside was cramped and uneven, written in blue ink. The entries were dated, starting in March 1998 and ending in October of the same year. The name on the first page was Kenneth Rupp. I didn't recognize the name, but as I read, I realized Kenneth had lived in this house. He'd bought it in early 1998, just like I had, and he'd heard the breathing too. The entries started normally enough. Complaints about moving costs, notes about repairs he needed to make, observations about the neighborhood. But around April, the tone changed. Heard it again last night. Thought it was the furnace, but I turned it off and the sound continued. It's coming from the walls, or maybe the floor. I can't tell. May. It's getting louder. I can hear it during the day now. My co-workers think I'm losing it. Maybe I am. July. I went into the basement last night and just stood there, listening. The breathing was so loud I could feel it in my chest. It was like the house was alive, like it was watching me. August. I tried to leave. I packed a bag, got in my car, and started driving, but I couldn't do it. I got to the end of the street and just stopped. I felt like if I left, something bad would happen, like the house wouldn't let me. The final entry was dated October 14th, 1998. I'm not alone here. I don't know what it is, but I'm not alone. I can feel it now, even when the breathing stops. It's in the walls, it's in the floor, it's in the air, it's inside me. I think it's always been here. I think it was waiting. That was the last entry. I looked up Kenneth Rupp online. I found an obituary. He died in November 1998 in this house, from what was listed as natural causes. He was 41 years old. The obituary didn't provide any additional details. I started asking around. I went to Harold and Rita's house and asked if they remembered Kenneth. Rita's face went pale. She looked at Harold, then back at me. He was a nice man, she said quietly. Kept to himself. We didn't know him well. He wasn't here very long. What happened to him? Harold stood up. You should talk to someone else about this. Who? Anyone. Just not us. They closed the door. I kept researching. I found property records going back to the 1970s. The house had changed hands 9 times in 40 years. The average length of ownership was less than 2 years. Every single owner had sold quickly, often at a loss. One couple, the Desjardins, had lasted only 6 months before putting it back on the market. I tried to contact previous owners. Most didn't respond. One man, named Elliot Vargas, called me back. He'd owned the house from 2003 to 2004. When I asked him why he'd sold, he was silent for a long time. You hear it yet? He finally asked. Yeah. Then you know. Get out while you still can. He hung up. I tried. I really did. I listed the house, hired a different realtor, priced it aggressively, but every showing ended the same way. Potential buyers would walk through, smile politely, and then leave without making an offer. One couple asked to use the bathroom and came back looking shaken. They left without saying another word. After 3 months, I took the house off the market. I couldn't sell it, and by that point, I wasn't sure I wanted to leave. Because Elliot was right. The house doesn't let you go. I still live here. It's been 5 years. I still hear the breathing. Some nights it's so loud I can't sleep. Other nights it's barely a whisper. I've learned to live with it. I don't invite people over. I don't talk about it. I just exist here. The official story is that this house has bad pipes and settling issues. That's what the city inspector said when I filed a complaint. That's what the contractor said when I asked him to check the foundation. Everyone has an explanation that doesn't explain anything. But I know what's here. I've read Kenneth's journal a dozen times. I've felt what he felt. The house is alive. It breathes. It watches. And once you're inside, it doesn't let go. If you're looking at houses and one seems too good to be true, if the price is low and the realtor is pushy and the previous owners left in a hurry, walk away. Don't ask questions. Don't try to rationalize it. Just leave. Because some houses aren't empty, even when no one's home. The phone rang at 2:17 a.m., and when I answered it, no one was there. Just silence. Not dead air. There was something on the other end. A faint hiss, like static, and beneath it, something that might have been breathing. I said hello 3 times. Nothing. I hung up. It rang again 5 minutes later. Same thing. Silence. Static. That sound underneath. I hung up and unplugged the landline from the wall. The next morning, I chalked it up to a wrong number or a robocall malfunction. I was exhausted. I'd been working double shifts at the hospital for 2 weeks straight, and my brain wasn't functioning at full capacity. I plugged the phone back in, made coffee, and tried to forget about it. That night, it rang again. Same time. 2:17 a.m. This time, when I answered, I heard a voice. Faint. Distant. Like someone speaking from the bottom of a well. Help me. My name is Nadia Katsaros. I'm 46 years old, and I work as an emergency room nurse at a regional hospital in Thunder Bay, Ontario. I've been doing this job for 22 years. I've held the hands of dying patients, talked people through overdoses, helped deliver babies in the back of ambulances. I'm not easy to rattle. But that voice, that small, broken voice coming through my phone in the middle of the night, it got under my skin in a way nothing else ever had. Who is this? I asked. The line went dead. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat in my living room with all the lights on, staring at the phone, waiting for it to ring again. It didn't. The next day, I called the phone company. I explained what had happened and asked if they could trace the calls. The customer service rep said she'd look into it and call me back. She did, 3 hours later, and told me there was no record of any incoming calls to my number in the past 72 hours. That's impossible, I said. I answered the phone. I heard someone. I'm sorry, ma'am, but according to our system, no calls came through. I hung up and called my phone from my cell. It worked fine. I called a friend, asked her to call my landline. It rang. Everything was functioning normally. That night I stayed up. I sat on the couch with a cup of tea, reading a book, keeping myself awake. At 2:15 a.m., I put the book down and stared at the phone. At 2:17 a.m., it rang. I picked it up immediately. Who is this? Silence. Static. Then the voice again, clearer this time. Please, I can't get out. Where are you? I don't know. It's dark. I can't see. Please help me. What's your name? I don't remember. The line went dead. I called 911. I told the dispatcher what had happened. She was patient but skeptical. She asked if I'd been threatened, if I knew the caller, if I had any reason to believe someone was in danger. I said no to all of it. She said she'd file a report, but that there wasn't much they could do without more information. I started recording the calls. I set up my phone to automatically start recording whenever the landline rang. The next night, at 2:17 a.m., it rang again. I answered. The voice was there. It's so cold, I can't feel my hands. Where are you? Give me something. A street, a building, anything. I don't know. There's water. I can hear water. What kind of water? A river? A lake? I don't know. Please. I'm so cold. The call ended. I played back the recording. It was there. The voice, the static, everything. I saved the file and sent it to the RCMP the next morning. 2 days later, a constable named Derek Monroe came to my apartment. He was in his early 30s, polite but clearly skeptical. He listened to the recording, made notes, and asked me a series of questions. Did I know anyone who might be playing a prank? Had I noticed anyone following me? Had there been any recent disputes with neighbors or co-workers? No. Ms. Katsaros, he said carefully, is it possible you're under a lot of stress? Working long hours? Not sleeping well? I stared at him. You think I'm imagining this? I think it's worth considering all possibilities. Then explain the recording. He didn't have an answer for that. The calls continued. Every night at 2:17 a.m., sometimes the voice would say the same things. Other times, it would say something new. There's a door, but it won't open. I can see light, but it's far away. I think I've been here a long time. I'm not alone. That last one made my blood run cold. I started researching. I looked up missing persons cases in Thunder Bay, going back years. I found dozens. Some were resolved. Some weren't. I looked for cases involving water, cold, entrapment. Nothing matched. Then I found something. In November 2005, a woman named Iris Vandenberg had gone missing in Thunder Bay. She was 31 years old, worked as a clerk at a law firm, lived alone. She'd left work one evening and never made it home. Her car was found 3 days later in the parking lot of a marina on the shore of Lake Superior. No signs of struggle, no leads. Her body was never found. The case went cold. Her family held out hope for years, but eventually she was declared legally dead. I found a photo of Iris online. She had dark hair, kind eyes, a shy smile. I stared at that photo for a long time, trying to imagine what had happened to her. That night, when the phone rang, I asked a different question. Is your name Iris? There was a long pause. Then quietly, yes. My hands were shaking. Iris Vandenberg? Yes. How do you know my name? Iris, where are you? I told you. I don't know. It's dark. There's water. I'm so cold. Iris, listen to me. You went missing in 2005. It's 2022 now. Do you understand? Silence. Iris? That's not possible. I know it sounds impossible, but that's not possible. I just left work. I was going to my car, and then I was here. Iris, I need you to focus. Is there anything around you? Anything you can describe? There's metal, walls. It smells like rust and water. I think I'm in a container, a tank, something like that. Are you near the marina? I don't know. I can hear water. It sounds close. Iris, I'm going to find you, I promise. The line went dead. I called Constable Monroe. I told him everything. He listened, and this time, he didn't dismiss me. He said he'd look into it. The next day, a search team was dispatched to the marina and the surrounding industrial area. They checked old shipping containers, abandoned buildings, drainage systems, storage tanks. They searched for 3 days. They found her on the 3rd day. She was inside a decommissioned water tank buried beneath an old fish processing plant that had been shut down in 2003. The tank had been sealed with a steel cover and forgotten. Inside, they found skeletal remains, clothing, a purse with Iris Vandenberg's ID. The coroner estimated she'd been dead for approximately 17 years. Cause of death, hypothermia and dehydration. She'd been trapped inside the tank, unable to escape, and had died alone in the dark. The phone calls stopped after they found her. I attended her memorial service. Her family was there. Her sister, Lorraine Vandenberg, her elderly mother, a few cousins. I didn't tell them about the calls. I didn't think they'd believe me. I just paid my respects and left. But sometimes, late at night, my phone still rings. Not the landline. My cell. And when I answer, there's no one there. Just static. just that faint sound underneath, like someone breathing. The official explanation is that Iris Vandenberg accidentally fell into an unsealed water tank in 2005, became trapped, and died before anyone could find her. The phone calls I received were classified as an unexplained phenomenon, possibly related to crossed lines or audio artifacts from old recordings. That's the story in the official report. But I was there. I heard her voice. I recorded it. And I know that somehow, across 17 years and the boundary between life and death, Iris Vandenberg reached out and asked for help. I don't work night shifts anymore. I can't. Every time I see a phone ring at 2:17 a.m., I'm back in that living room, listening to that voice. If your phone rings in the middle of the night and there's no one on the other end, if you hear static or breathing or a voice asking for help, don't hang up. Listen, because sometimes the dead don't rest. Sometimes they're still trying to tell us where they are, and sometimes they're still waiting to be found. The scarecrow moved. I was checking fence lines on the north pasture when I saw it. The scarecrow my grandfather had built 30 years ago, standing in the same spot it had always stood, arms outstretched, head tilted to one side. Except now, it was facing a different direction. I'd walked this fence line every morning for 3 months, and that scarecrow had always faced east toward the sunrise. Now it was facing south toward the house. I stopped walking. I stared at it for a long time, trying to convince myself I was wrong. Maybe I'd misremembered. Maybe the wind had turned it. But there was no wind that morning. The air was perfectly still. I kept walking. My name is Travis Bourque. I'm 29 years old and I run a cattle ranch about 40 kilometers outside of Grande Prairie, Alberta. The ranch has been in my family for 3 generations. My grandfather built it from nothing. My father expanded it, and when he died 2 years ago, it became mine. It's not a big operation. 200 acres, 80 head of cattle, a few horses. It's enough to make a living if you work hard and don't expect luxuries. I live alone in the old farmhouse at the center of the property. My nearest neighbor is 8 kilometers away. It's quiet, isolated, exactly the way I like it. The scarecrow had been there since before I was born. My grandfather made it out of old fence posts and burlap sacks, dressed it in his work clothes, and stuck it in the middle of the north pasture to keep birds away from the feed. It had stood there for decades, slowly rotting, falling apart, but never quite collapsing. It was part of the landscape. You stopped noticing it after a while, until it moved. The second time I saw it, it was closer to the fence. Maybe 10 meters closer than it had been. I know that sounds impossible. Scarecrows don't walk, but I'm telling you, it was closer. I walked out to it, examined it up close. The posts were still stuck in the ground. The clothes were still rotting. The burlap head was still sagging to one side. But it had moved. I told myself I was losing it. Stress, lack of sleep, grief. I'd been working 18-hour days trying to keep the ranch afloat, and I hadn't taken a day off in months. It was getting to me. That was the only explanation. But the next morning it was even closer. Now it was standing just inside the fence line, maybe 30 meters from the barn. I could see it from the kitchen window, and it was facing the house again. I grabbed a shovel and walked out to it. I was going to tear it down, burn it, get rid of it. I was done. But when I got close, I stopped. There were footprints in the dirt around it. Not boot prints, not animal tracks. These were bare feet, human feet, small, like a child's. They circled the scarecrow 3 times and then led away, toward the tree line at the edge of the property. I followed them. The tracks led into the trees, through the underbrush, and stopped abruptly in a small clearing. There was nothing there. No sign of who or what had made them. Just the tracks, ending in the middle of nowhere. I went back to the house and called my nearest neighbor, a man named Roy Dempsey. He'd lived in the area his whole life. If anyone knew the history of this land, it was him. "Roy, have you ever heard of anything strange happening on my property?" He was quiet for a moment. "What kind of strange?" "Things moving, footprints that don't make sense." Another pause. "You seeing the scarecrow?" My blood went cold. "What do you mean, am I seeing it?" "Your grandfather saw it too. Toward the end. He didn't talk about it much, but he mentioned it once or twice. Said it moved. Said it watched him." "Watched him?" "That's what he said. He thought he was losing his mind. Maybe he was. But then again, there's things out there we don't understand." "What things?" "Your land used to be part of a bigger homestead way back. 1800s. Family named Crowchild lived there. They had a daughter, maybe 7 or 8 years old. One winter she went missing. They searched for weeks. Never found her. Story goes, she froze to death somewhere out in the fields. Some folks say her spirit never left." "You think a ghost is moving my scarecrow?" "I think there's a lot we don't know, Travis. And I think you should be careful." That night, I sat in the kitchen with all the lights on, staring out the window at the scarecrow. It was still there, motionless, facing the house. I didn't sleep. I just watched. At 3:14 a.m., it moved. I saw it. I was looking right at it. And it moved. Not fast, not like it was walking. It just shifted. One moment it was 30 meters away. The next, it was 20 meters away, like someone had edited a film, cutting out the frames in between. I grabbed my shotgun and went outside. I walked right up to it, leveled the barrel at its chest, and said, "I don't know what you are, but you need to leave." The scarecrow didn't respond. It just stood there, swaying slightly in a breeze I couldn't feel. I lowered the shotgun. I felt stupid. I was threatening a pile of sticks and burlap. I turned to walk back to the house. That's when I heard it. A voice. Quiet. High-pitched. A child's voice. I'm cold. I spun around. The scarecrow was still there, but now, standing behind it, barely visible in the darkness, was a little girl. She was barefoot, wearing a thin dress, her hair long and tangled. She was staring at me with wide, hollow eyes. "I'm so cold," she said again. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just stood there, staring at her. "Please," she whispered. "I want to go home." Then she was gone. Not fading, not walking away, just gone, like she'd never been there. I ran back to the house, locked every door, closed every window. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sleep for 3 nights. On the 4th night, I came home from town to find the scarecrow standing on my porch, right in front of the door, facing it, like it was waiting for me to let it in. I called Roy. I told him everything. He drove over, took one look at the scarecrow and shook his head. "You need to move it." "Move it where?" "Off your property. Doesn't matter where. Just get it out of here." We loaded it into the back of my truck and drove 20 kilometers down the highway. We dumped it in a ditch and drove away. The next morning it was back, standing in the same spot in the north pasture, facing the house. I left the ranch 2 weeks later. I couldn't do it anymore. I sold the cattle, leased the land to a farming cooperative, and moved into town. I haven't been back since. The official story is that I had a breakdown, grief, isolation, stress. That's what I told people, and most of them believed it. But Roy knows the truth. He checks on the property once a month. He says the scarecrow is still there, still facing the house, still waiting. I don't know what it wants. I don't know if it's the girl or something else, or just the land itself refusing to let go of its dead. But I know this. Some things don't stay where you put them. Some things move in ways that don't make sense. And some things watch you, waiting for the moment you're not paying attention. If you live alone in a remote place, If you start seeing things that shouldn't be there or hearing voices you can't explain, don't ignore it. Don't convince yourself it's nothing, because it's not nothing. And it's not going away. The GPS said I'd reach Terrace in 40 minutes. That was 6 hours ago. I've been driving Highway 37 through northern British Columbia since just after midnight, and the road keeps going. The signs say I'm heading north. The GPS says I'm heading north, but I haven't passed a single landmark I recognize. No towns, no gas stations, no turnoffs, just trees, darkness, and this road that never ends. My name is Sadie Moreau. I'm 26 years old. I work as a freelance photographer, and I'd been up in the Yukon for 2 weeks shooting landscapes for a tourism campaign. I was heading home to Vancouver, taking the long route through the interior because I wanted to get some shots of the northern forests. I'd done this drive before. I knew the route, or at least I thought I did. I left Whitehorse just before midnight. The plan was to drive through the night, stop in Terrace for breakfast, and push through to Prince George by evening. It's a long drive, but I'm used to it. I had coffee, podcasts, and a full tank of gas. I wasn't worried. The first 2 hours were normal. I passed through small towns, saw the occasional set of headlights, stopped once at a rest area to stretch my legs. The road was empty but familiar. Then, somewhere south of the Yukon-BC border, things started to feel wrong. I noticed it gradually. The road markers stopped. The reflective signs that usually indicate distance and direction, they just weren't there anymore. I kept driving, expecting to see something, anything, but the road just kept going. Trees on both sides, identical and endless. No curves, no hills, just straight, flat pavement disappearing into the dark. My GPS showed me on Highway 37 heading south, making progress. But the estimated time to Terrace wasn't changing. It stayed at 40 minutes, then 38, then 40 again. Like the system was glitching. I tried calling someone. No signal. I tried the radio. Static on every station. I should have turned around. I know that now, but I kept thinking, it's just a dead zone. I'll hit a town soon. So I kept driving. At some point, I noticed the trees. They weren't moving past me the way they should have been. I was going 80 kilometers an hour, but the trees looked like they were barely shifting. Like I was on a treadmill, moving but not getting anywhere. Then I saw the car. It was parked on the shoulder, maybe 100 meters ahead. Hazard lights blinking. I slowed down, pulled over behind it. It was a silver sedan. Alberta plates, driver's door open. No one inside. The engine was still running. I got out and called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" No response. Just the sound of the engine idling and the wind moving through the trees. I walked around the car. The interior was clean. No personal items. No luggage. No signs of a struggle. Just an empty car with the keys in the ignition and the door hanging open. Like the driver had stepped out for a moment and never come back. I looked down the road, both directions. Nothing. No lights. No movement. Just the road, stretching into the dark. I got back in my car and kept driving. I thought about calling the police when I got signal, reporting the abandoned vehicle. But first, I needed to get out of this dead zone. 20 minutes later, I saw another car. Same thing. Parked on the shoulder. Hazard lights on, driver's door open, engine running. This one was a red pickup truck. Saskatchewan plates, empty. I didn't stop this time, I just kept driving. Then I saw a third, a blue SUV. Ontario plates, open door, engine running, and a fourth and a fifth. They were spaced out, maybe 10 kilometers apart, all on the side of the road. All abandoned, all identical in the way they'd been left. Doors open, engines running, no one inside. I started to panic. I tried turning around, but there was nowhere to turn. The road was narrow, hemmed in by dense trees on both sides, no shoulders wide enough to pull off. And every time I thought about stopping, something in my gut told me not to. Told me that if I stopped moving, I'd end up like the others. That's when I saw her. She was standing in the middle of the road, maybe 50 meters ahead. A woman, long hair. She was facing me, arms at her sides, perfectly still. I slammed on the brakes, skidding to a stop a few meters from her. She didn't move. I honked the horn. She didn't react. I rolled down my window and shouted, "Are you okay? Do you need help?" She just stood there, staring at me. Her face was pale. Her eyes were dark, sunken, and she was smiling, not a friendly smile. Something wrong, something that made my skin crawl. I put the car in reverse and started backing up. She didn't follow. She just stood there, watching me. I backed up for maybe 20 seconds, then threw the car into drive and swerved around her, accelerating hard. I looked in the rearview mirror. She was gone. I kept driving. The road kept going. The GPS kept saying 40 minutes to Terrace. The clock on my dashboard said it was almost 6 a.m., but the sky was still completely dark. No hint of dawn, just endless night. Then I saw a sign, the first sign I'd seen in hours. It was old, rusted, barely legible. It said, "You are leaving, that's it. No town name, no direction, just you are leaving." And then, like a switch had been flipped, I was through. The road curved, the trees changed, the sky started to lighten. I saw a gas station ahead, lights on, open sign glowing. I pulled in, got out, and just stood there for a minute, shaking. The attendant, a man named Rick Toes, came out and asked if I was okay. I told him I'd been driving for hours, that I'd gotten lost, that something was wrong with the road. He looked at me strangely. "Where'd you come from?" "Highway 37. North of here. That road's been closed for maintenance since midnight. There's a detour." "I didn't see a detour." "Well, you must have missed it. How'd you get through?" I didn't have an answer. I filled up my tank, got coffee, and checked my phone. I had signal again. The map showed I was just outside Terrace. I'd made it. But according to my phone, I'd been driving for 9 hours, not 6, and I'd covered less than 200 kilometers. I reported the abandoned cars to the RCMP. They said they'd send someone to check. I never heard back. I looked up news reports, missing persons, anything related to Highway 37 in the past few weeks. Nothing. The official explanation is that I got disoriented, missed the detour, and ended up on a poorly marked alternate route. That exhaustion and darkness made me misjudge time and distance. That the abandoned cars were either hallucinations or vehicles left by hunters and work crews, but I know what I saw. I know how long I drove, and I know that for 6 hours I was on a road that doesn't exist on any map. A road where other people had stopped and never started again. I don't drive at night anymore. I don't take long trips alone, and I will never, ever go back to Highway 37. If you're driving through remote areas and the road starts to feel wrong, if the signs disappear, if your GPS stops making sense, if you see cars abandoned with their engines running, turn around. Immediately. Don't keep going. Don't convince yourself you'll find a way through. Because some roads don't take you where you're trying to go. They take you somewhere else, somewhere in between, and not everyone makes it back. She was always apologizing for the noise. Mrs. Vesna Kadic, the woman who lived in the basement apartment below mine, would knock on my door at least once a week to say she was sorry for the sounds. The footsteps, the scraping, the voices. She was elderly, maybe 75, a widow who'd immigrated from Croatia decades ago. She spoke English with a thick accent and kept to herself. I always told her the same thing. I didn't hear anything. My apartment was quiet. She had nothing to apologize for, but she kept apologizing. every week, like clockwork. I am so sorry for the noise. I try to keep them quiet, but they do not always listen. I never understood what she meant by them. My name is Brendan Gillis. I'm 37 years old, and I work as a software developer in Halifax, Nova Scotia. 3 years ago, I moved into a 2-story house that had been converted into apartments. Me on the main floor, Mrs. Kadich in the basement. The landlord, a man named Chester Belliveau, lived off-site and rarely came around. The rent was cheap, the location was good, and Mrs. Kadich seemed harmless. It was a fine arrangement, until she died. I found out from Chester. He called me one morning and said Mrs. Kadich had passed away in her sleep. Natural causes. The funeral would be small, family only. He'd be cleaning out her apartment over the next few weeks and looking for a new tenant. I felt bad. She'd been a kind woman. Lonely, maybe a little confused toward the end, but kind. I sent flowers to the funeral home and didn't think much more about it. That night I heard the footsteps. They came from directly below my bedroom. Slow, heavy footsteps, pacing back and forth. I assumed it was Chester down there clearing things out. I rolled over and went back to sleep. The next night I heard them again. Same pattern, pacing back and forth. I checked the time. 2:30 a.m. I texted Chester, "You working late downstairs?" He replied the next morning, "Haven't been there in days. Heading over this weekend." So who was in the apartment? I went downstairs and knocked on Mrs. Kadich's door. No answer. I tried the handle. Locked. I put my ear to the door. Silence. That night, the footsteps came back, but this time there were voices too. Low, indistinct, like people having a conversation just below the threshold of hearing. I couldn't make out words, but I could hear the cadence. Back and forth. Question and answer. I went downstairs again. Knocked. No answer. I called Chester. "Is someone staying in Mrs. Kadich's apartment?" "No. Why?" "I'm hearing things. Footsteps. Voices." He sighed. "It's an old house, Brendan. Pipes. Settling. You know how it is." "It's not pipes. I'll come by tomorrow and take a look." Chester came by the next afternoon. We went into the basement apartment together. It was exactly as Mrs. Kadich had left it. Furniture in place, dishes in the sink, photos on the walls. It smelled like old lavender and dust. "See?" Chester said. "No one here." "What about at night?" "I'll change the locks if it makes you feel better, but I'm telling you, no one's been here." He changed the locks. That night, the footsteps came back. Louder this time, and the voices were clearer. I could almost make out words. Almost. I started recording. I set up my phone on the floor, directly above where the sounds were coming from, and let it run all night. In the morning, I played it back. The footsteps were there. The voices were there. Faint but audible. I isolated the audio, amplified it, filtered out background noise, and I heard her. Mrs. Kadich, her voice clear as day. "Please, you must leave now. He is coming." And then another voice, lower, male. I couldn't make out what it said, but the tone was aggressive, threatening. Then silence. I sent the recording to Chester. He didn't respond. I called him. He finally picked up on the 4th try. "Chester, did you listen to it?" "Yeah, I listened." "That's her voice. That's Mrs. Kadich." "I know. How is that possible?" He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "There's something I didn't tell you. When I cleaned out her apartment, I found journals. Notebooks full of writing. Most of it was in Croatian, but some of it was in English. She wrote about the people downstairs." "What people?" "She said there were people living under the apartment, beneath the floor. She said they came up at night. She said she tried to keep them quiet so they wouldn't bother you." "That's insane." "I know, but she believed it, and toward the end, She was convinced they were getting angrier. She wrote that they wanted to come upstairs, that she was holding them back. Holding them back how? I don't know. She didn't say. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in my living room with the lights on, listening. The footsteps started just after midnight. But this time, they weren't just below me. They were moving, coming closer, toward the stairs that connected the basement to the main floor. I heard the door at the bottom of the stairs open. I heard footsteps on the stairs. Slow, deliberate, coming up. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen and stood in the hallway, staring at the door that led to the basement. The footsteps stopped on the other side. The door handle turned. I don't know how long I stood there, holding that knife, staring at the handle as it slowly rotated. The door was locked. It shouldn't have been able to open, but the handle kept turning over and over like someone on the other side was testing it, trying to figure out how to get through. Then it stopped. The footsteps retreated down the stairs. The basement door closed. I left that night, packed a bag, and went to a motel. I called Chester in the morning and told him I was breaking my lease. He didn't argue. He said he'd return my damage deposit and waive the penalty. I moved out 2 days later. I never went back. Chester called me a month later. He said he'd found something while renovating the basement. Underneath the concrete floor there was a crawl space, and in that crawl space they'd found bones. Human bones. Multiple individuals, dating back decades. The police were investigating, but it looked like the house had been built over an unmarked burial site. Possibly from the 1800s, possibly indigenous, possibly something else. The official explanation is that Mrs. Kadich, suffering from dementia and paranoia, had created a delusion about people living under her apartment, influenced by subconscious awareness of the remains beneath the floor. The sounds I heard were attributed to settling, rodents, and auditory pareidolia. That's the official story, but I heard her voice. I heard the footsteps. I saw that door handle turn, and I know that whatever Mrs. Kadich was keeping quiet, it didn't stop when she died. If you live in an old building and the person below you keeps apologizing for noises you don't hear, if you start hearing footsteps where no one should be walking, don't ignore it. Don't assume it's nothing, because sometimes the noises aren't coming from where you think they are. And sometimes the dead aren't the ones you need to be afraid of. It's what they were holding back. The first night we stayed there, my daughter said she saw a man standing at the end of the dock. She was 6 years old at the time, and she'd gotten up to use the bathroom around midnight. On her way back to bed, she looked out the window that faced the lake and saw him standing perfectly still, staring at the house. I went outside with a flashlight. There was no one there. No footprints in the sand. No boat tied to the dock. I told her she'd had a dream, that sometimes when you're in a new place, your mind plays tricks on you. She didn't argue, but I could tell she didn't believe me. My name is Patricia Hyland. I'm 41 years old, and I'm a high school English teacher from Ottawa. In the summer of 2018, my husband Garrett, our 2 daughters Emma and Sophie, and I rented a cottage on Lac Simon, about an hour northwest of the city. We'd been going through a rough patch. Garrett had been working long hours. I'd been stressed about layoffs at the school, and the girls needed a break from the city. The cottage seemed perfect, secluded, peaceful. The listing photos showed a charming old A-frame right on the water, with a long dock and a canoe. What the listing didn't mention was the history. We arrived on a Friday evening in early July. The cottage was exactly as advertised. Rustic but comfortable, with a big stone fireplace, a screened-in porch, and windows that overlooked the lake. The nearest neighbor was half a kilometer away through the trees. It felt like we had the whole lake to ourselves. The first 2 days were wonderful. We swam, fished, roasted marshmallows, read books on the dock. Emma and Sophie played together without fighting. Garrett and I actually talked like we used to. It felt like we were reconnecting. Then Sophie saw the man on the dock. After that, things started to feel different. Emma, who was 9, said she kept hearing footsteps on the porch at night. Garrett said he'd seen a light moving through the trees behind the cottage, like someone walking with a flashlight. I tried to brush it all off. Wildlife, other cottages, headlights from the road. But I could feel it too, the sense that we weren't alone. On the 4th night, I woke up to the sound of the screen door opening and closing. I got out of bed and went to the porch. Emma was standing there in her pajamas, staring out at the lake. "Emma, what are you doing?" She didn't answer. She just kept staring. I walked up behind her and put my hand on her shoulder. She flinched, like I'd woken her from a trance. "Mom? What are you doing out here, sweetheart?" I don't know. I thought I heard someone calling my name." "There's no one out here. Come on, let's go back to bed." The next morning, I found wet footprints on the porch. Small footprints. A child's. They led from the lake to the screen door and stopped. I asked the girls if either of them had gone outside during the night. They both said no. Garrett said he'd been asleep the whole time. The footprints didn't match any of our shoe sizes. I called the rental company and asked about the cottage's history. The woman on the phone, a cheerful lady named Sandra Theriault, said the property had been in the same family for generations. The current owners had only started renting it out a few years ago. She didn't mention anything unusual. Has anyone ever reported anything strange happening there? Strange how? I don't know. Noises, sightings, anything like that. There was a pause. "Why do you ask?" "My kids have been seeing things, hearing things. I'm sure it's nothing, but..." "Look," Sandra said, her tone shifting. "I'm not supposed to talk about this, but since you asked, there was an incident. A long time ago, a little boy drowned in the lake. It was an accident. He was staying at the cottage with his family, went out on the dock by himself, fell in. They didn't find him until the next day." "When did this happen?" 1987. That's over 30 years ago. "I know, but some families who've stayed there have mentioned things, footprints, voices. A figure on the dock. The owners don't believe in any of that stuff, and honestly, most guests don't experience anything. But I wanted you to know, since you asked." That night, Garrett and I sat the girls down and told them what we'd learned. We tried to frame it gently, but kids are smart. They understood. A child had died here. And maybe, just maybe, something of him had stayed behind. Sophie, always the more sensitive one, asked, "Is he lonely?" I didn't know how to answer that. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the boy, about what it must have been like falling into cold water, unable to get back to the surface. His family inside the cottage with no idea what was happening. I wondered if he'd called out for help, if anyone had heard him. Around 2 a.m. I heard it. A voice, faint, coming from outside. A child's voice calling out, "Help, please, help me." I got up, my heart pounding, and looked out the window. There was someone on the dock, a small figure, a child. He was standing at the very end, looking down into the water. I ran outside, barefoot, not thinking. I ran down to the dock, calling out, "Hold on, I'm coming." When I got to the end of the dock, there was no one there. But the water below was disturbed, rippling, like something had just gone under. I stood there, shaking, staring into the dark water, and I swear I saw a face looking up at me from just below the surface. A boy's face. Pale, eyes wide, mouth open. Then it was gone. I ran back to the cottage, woke Garrett, and told him we were leaving. First thing in the morning. I didn't care about losing the deposit. We were done. He didn't argue. We packed up at dawn and left. The girls were upset, but I didn't explain. I just said we needed to go home. On the drive back, Emma asked if the boy on the dock had been real. I told her I didn't know. But I did know. I'd seen him, I'd heard him, and I knew that he was still there, still calling for help, still waiting for someone to save him. We never went back. A year later, I looked up the cottage listing again. It was no longer available for rent. I reached out to Sandra at the rental company. She said the owners had taken it off the market. Too many complaints. Too many guests checking out early. The official story is that the cottage is just old, creaky, and surrounded by wildlife that makes noises at night. That the drowning in 1987 was a tragedy but has no bearing on the present. That children have active imaginations, especially in unfamiliar places. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And I know that some places hold on to their tragedies. They don't let go. And the people who died there don't let go either. If you're renting a cottage or staying somewhere remote and your children start seeing things, if you hear voices calling for help in the middle of the night, trust your instincts. Leave. Don't try to rationalize it. Don't convince yourself it's nothing. Because sometimes the dead are still there. Still waiting, still hoping someone will hear them. And sometimes they're not asking for much. Just for someone to acknowledge that they existed, that they mattered, that they didn't disappear. The last guest checked in at 11:47 p.m. I remember because I looked at the clock right after he walked through the door. He was tall, maybe 6'3", wearing a long dark coat and a baseball cap pulled low. He didn't make eye contact. He just walked up to the desk and said, "I need a room." I asked for ID and a credit card. He handed me a driver's license. I didn't look at the name, just scanned it and gave it back, and paid cash. $200. He said he'd be gone by morning. I gave him the key to room 14, second floor at the end of the hall. He took it without a word and walked upstairs. I didn't see him again. My name is Lyle Beaumont, and I'm a night clerk at the Pine Grove Motor Inn, a small roadside motel just outside of Kamloops, British Columbia. I'm 52 years old. I've been working the night shift here for 7 years. It's quiet work, lonely, but that's how I like it. Most nights I sit behind the desk, read a book, watch old movies on my laptop. Occasionally someone checks in late, truckers, travelers, people passing through. I check them in, give them a key, and forget about them. But the man in room 14, I didn't forget about him. At 3:17 a.m., the fire alarm went off. Not the whole building, just the one on the second floor near room 14. I grabbed the extinguisher from behind the desk and ran upstairs. There was no smoke, no fire, just the alarm blaring. I checked room 14. The door was closed. I knocked. No answer. I used my master key and opened it. The room was empty. The bed was made. The lights were off. There was no sign anyone had been there. No luggage. No personal items. Nothing. The window was closed and locked from the inside. I turned off the alarm and went back downstairs. I checked the log. The man had checked in 3 hours ago. He hadn't checked out. His key was still missing. I pulled up the security camera footage. We have 2 cameras, one covering the front entrance, one covering the parking lot. I reviewed the footage from 11:47 p.m. onward. I saw the man walk in. I saw him approach the desk. I saw him take the key and walk upstairs, but I never saw him come back down, and I never saw him leave. I checked the parking lot. His vehicle, a dark SUV, was gone. I called my manager, a woman named Gretchen LaViolette. She told me to check the room again, make sure nothing was stolen or damaged. I did. Everything was fine. She said to write it up as an early checkout and move on. But something felt wrong. I couldn't stop thinking about the way the man had looked, or rather, the way he hadn't looked. I realized, sitting there at 4 a.m., that I couldn't remember his face. I'd seen him. I'd talked to him. But when I tried to picture him, there was nothing. just a vague shape, a shadow in a coat. The next night I was at the desk when the phone rang. It was room 14. I picked up. "Front desk, how can I help you?" Silence. Then a voice, low, hoarse. I never left. The line went dead. I ran upstairs. Room 14 was empty. I checked every other room, all empty except for 2 guests on the first floor, both asleep. I went back to the desk and pulled up the security footage from that night. There was nothing unusual. No one had entered the building. No one had gone upstairs. But room 14's phone had called the front desk. The log showed it. 12:04 a.m., room 14 to front desk. Call duration, 11 seconds. I checked the room's phone. It was unplugged. The next night, I heard footsteps upstairs. Slow, deliberate, pacing back and forth. I went up to investigate. The hallway was empty. But the footsteps continued. They were coming from inside room 14. I opened the door. Nothing. Empty room. But the moment I stepped inside, the footsteps stopped. I felt it then. That cold, heavy feeling you get when you know you're not alone. When you know something is watching you, even if you can't see it. I backed out of the room and locked the door. I went downstairs and called Gretchen. I told her what was happening. She didn't believe me, but she said she'd come by in the morning. When she arrived, I showed her the call log. I played the voicemail the phone system had recorded from room 14. It was just breathing, slow, ragged, in and out. She listened to it twice, then looked at me. "Lyle, are you okay? Like, mentally?" "I'm fine. Something is going on in that room." "I think you're tired. You've been working too many nights. Take a week off." "I'm not crazy." "I didn't say you were. I said take a week off." I refused. I kept working. And every night something happened. The phone in room 14 would ring with no one on the other end. The door would be found unlocked, even though I'd locked it. Guests in nearby rooms complained about footsteps and voices. One couple checked out in the middle of the night, saying they'd heard someone pounding on their wall from room 14, which was empty. Finally, Gretchen brought in a priest. Father Luc Dufresne, from a church in town. He came one afternoon, blessed the room, said prayers, sprinkled holy water. He said if there was anything there, it was gone now. That night, the phone in room 14 rang again. I didn't answer it. I just let it ring. 20 times, 30, 40. It rang for 10 minutes straight before it finally stopped. The next morning, I quit. I don't work nights anymore. I got a job at a hardware store. Daytime hours, no overnight shifts. I don't drive past the Pine Grove Motor Inn. I don't think about room 14, but sometimes, late at night, my phone rings. And when I answer, there's no one there. Just breathing. Slow. Ragged. And I know who it is. The official explanation is that the motel has faulty wiring and old phone lines that sometimes cross signals with other buildings. That the sounds and calls were the result of electrical interference and auditory hallucinations brought on by isolation and sleep deprivation. But I was there. I heard the voice. I saw the call logs. I felt that presence in room 14. And I know that whoever checked in that night never left. Not really. He's still there. Still making calls. Still pacing the halls. Still waiting. If you ever check into a motel late at night and the clerk gives you a room at the end of a dark hallway, if you hear footsteps in the room above you or your phone rings with no one on the other end, don't stay. Pack your things and leave. Find another place. It's not worth it, because some guests never check out. They just stay forever. And sometimes they want company.